Welcome to episode 5 of I Thought I Knew How, a podcast about knitting and life and all sorts. I'm your host, Anne Frost, and this episode was recorded on March 22nd, 2019. Today I'd like to talk to you some about the third swatch for the Master Knitting program and talk about tension as I do so. I'll also talk about the projects I've been working on since I last spoke to you. And I have a bunch of other stuff to talk about today, including my first ever giveaway. How exciting is that? All that plus some music to knit by. I'm going to move all my contact info to the end of the podcast in this and future episodes. So if you are listening and need to hear how to get in touch with me, just skip to the last minute or two of the recording and you'll find that information there. However, I do want to say here that we now have a group on Ravelry. Yay! Look for it there. It's called I Thought I Knew How Podcast. And as of this recording, 8 of you have already found it. So well done. Please join us there for chatting about the episodes and other topics. And please take the time to introduce yourself on the intros thread. One of the funny things about being a podcaster is you really have no idea where your listeners are coming from or who they are. Even if I pay extra for more stats from my hosting company, I can see where in the world my listeners are coming from. But that really only tells me so much about you, and I'd like to at least get to say hello and thank you for listening. Also, I always forget that people can leave ratings on iTunes. I was checking earlier today to see if the updated album art had finally taken hold on the iTunes page for the podcast and saw that I had 6 people who had taken the time to go over and leave 5-star ratings. I'm really honored. And thank you to Spin a Yarn and McBon and I hate having to submit a nickname for taking the time to leave kind comments as well. While I'm at it, I'd like to thank Kitty for saying hello on the Ravelry introduction thread, and hello as well to Aurora, who sent me a nice letter through direct message. Oh, and hello to Stacy. I know Stacy from town, and she started listening to the podcast and grabbed me at church the other day to tell me she's really enjoying it. I love hearing from all of you. I got another message on Ravelry from a listener named Julie. She has also been working through the Master Hand Knitter program, and she actually remembered the issue of whether or not to knit ribbing in a smaller needle had come up in the Knitting Guild's Ravelry board in the past. So she went and found where the issue was addressed and sent the reference to me. And I'm so glad she did, because I spent so long trying to find a definitive answer about this point. For those of you who may be new to the podcast or just don't remember from the last episode, as I researched the ribbing for swatches 1 and 2 in my knitting reference books, I kept seeing comments about knitting the ribbing with smaller needles, and I couldn't tell if I was supposed to do that for the program or not. So I tested it out and found that it didn't make much of a difference for swatch 1, but swatch 2 with the knit 1 purl 1 ribbing did look much better when I worked it with a much smaller needle. Julie saved me, because in that thread on the board, someone asked this specific question and the answer was no, you need to knit the entire swatch with the same needle. And in fact, the instructions for swatches 1 to 3 say to knit those swatches in the same yarn, same color, and with the same needles. So Julie really did me quite a favor by pointing me in the right direction and calling my attention to that. So thank you again, Julie. I swear half of the work of the Master Knitter program is making sure you are properly ingesting and applying the instructions. Since I last spoke to you, I've been struggling with swatch 3, which is to knit and seed stitch. That's all. Just cast on 25 stitches and knit and seed stitch for 4.5 inches. I have knit seed stitch so many times in my life that I thought this was not going to be an issue at all, but after looking at a few videos and reading up on the requirements, I realized that I am not producing ideal results. Seed stitch, of course, is when you knit a row of knit 1, purl 1, and then on the return row, you purl over your knits and knit over your purls. The problem with this is that if you don't have your tension spot on the entire time, you end up with little gaps between the stitches. I have knit this swatch about 15 times. I really wish I was exaggerating. I went into it overly confident, noticed I was not nailing it, and stopped and pulled it out and started over and over and over. I am improving, but I have yet to hit on a swatch that I feel confident enough to submit. And I will add, Arenda Holiday has a series of videos on YouTube to offer hints and helps to those of us going through the program. And she says in her video about seed stitch that you will never get a swatch with no holes. And that's okay, because we are hand knitters and not machine knitters. So I am keeping that in mind, but I do think that there is still room for me to improve. And I promise that this is not my perfectionism creeping up on me. I am getting better along those lines. I just need to keep practicing. I have found that as I practice, it helps a lot to just sit and put on some mellow music or a calm podcast and just focus on the feel of the stitches and maintaining the same degree of tension and the same amount of movement as I work the stitches, but I'm not quite there yet. So rather than continuing to destroy my yarn by reknitting the same swatch over and over with it, I'm going to dig out some worsted weight wool from my stash and just knit a seed stitch scarf. I'll work on it a little bit every day, and it will be my time when I just shut everything off and give my knitting my full attention. I'll aim to knit a few inches daily and just focus on building the muscle memory required to be able to sit down and knit a swatch I feel comfortable submitting to the program. Let's take a break for some music. I have an interesting pick for you today. H.R. Jothapala was a singer from Sri Lanka. He often was the singing voice for male actors in Sinhalese movies, and he has a nice mellow tone to his voice that goes well with those moments when I have to really focus. The song I'm going to play for you now is available on the Free Music Archive. It's a song written about the universal topic of love and is called Ma Jewanaye, which is Sinhala for life itself.
संसारे में जीवन ये मुलु संसारे उदारई 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 आदरे मादगिलेन्नी पेंसिलिलारे मादगिलेन्नी Lilare udarai 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 aadre me jeevan ye Dete benda elambi mat pevadare Dete benda elambi mat pevadare Sanasalu lalana tale divitek masigere enil desi belmin kelmen मायन गमनत दिरिते में जीवन ये मुलु संसारे में जीवन ये सतपाला यह नावे माँ हुआ सुवंद हाथु दुनि सतपाला यहाँ नावे माँ हुआ इंसार ऐगे तुरुले सेन तेरा जुन बाबा ए दारुए कुके पनवनी उत्तम अम्मा के आदर आई में जीवन मुलु संसारे माँ जगिलिन्ने पेंसिलिलारे उदाराई आदरे में जीवन
I've been thinking about tension a lot as I've worked on my seed stitch. I can go for rows and rows just fine and then somehow produce a larger than acceptable gap and not notice it until a row or two later. And I also find through my life that all is well until one day I look back and realize I've left a gap or three because my attention shifted, or I pulled too tightly, or I set my work down and didn't put it up again quickly enough. So when I got back to work, I'd lost the feel of how I'd been working before. Maybe a careless word to a child, not giving my full attention to directions, thinking my way is best without listening to others, leaving responsibilities unmet that someone else had to cover for. Nothing life-destroying, no major harm, but the sort of thing that leaves a hole. Because there's always that tension between what I want to do and what I should be doing. There are times when things need to be about me, but there are also times when I need to pull myself out of the way so that I can listen and speak and do for others. And that's not because I'm a mom or a woman. It's because I am part of something bigger, a family, a community, a species. Sometimes we may wish ourselves to a tropical island alone to do what we want without the responsibilities of life, but we need the tension. As knitters, we run our yarn over our fingers and around our needles and through our stitches, and we make sweaters and afghans and toys and socks. We create beauty and function by applying tension to our yarns just so. As people, we put ourselves through study and interactions and exertion, and we become the beauty. We become functional. But we have to get the tension right. Knit too tightly with a single ply yarn and it will snap before you're done with your first row. Insist on putting your own needs and thoughts first in all things, and you will eventually break or be broken. Yarn left unworked, free of tension, just pools on the ground, useless. A life left unworked amounts to the same thing. The question is, how do we best form the fabric with our knitting and ourselves? Just as we all knit with different levels of tension, and finding and perfecting that tension takes practice, we all have to live our lives at the point where the level of effort we exert stretches our current capacity. And that point of tension varies for all of us. No one wants a life that is so stressed that we break, but a life of complete ease at all times harms us just as much by robbing us of our potential to be our best selves. Every day is practice. Every day is a chance to put conscious effort into listening and doing and being who we want to be, of finding that spot where we find ourselves doing more than we thought we were capable of. And while we will always leave holes in our wake without meaning to, every day is practice, and hopefully, over time, our awareness will improve, the muscle memory will develop, and our lives will become something we are proud to wear. I am done beating myself up for not being as accomplished of a knitter as I thought I was going into the program. I started with the thought that I would be over and done by June and have it all sent in and sail right through level 1, but I was quickly humbled, and that's okay. I've been learning a lot about things I wasn't aware I was doing wrong. That's not always easy, but it allows me to be better. Being humbled is not a condemnation. It's an opportunity to grow. We need the tension. I just got my quarterly shipment of laundry detergent in the mail. Drops delivers right to my door every 4 months, so I have one less thing to keep on top of. Their detergents are effective and free from extra dyes and useless ingredients added by other brands. Plus, they only use cardboard packaging, so by choosing Drops, I'm not adding to the increasing amount of plastics in the environment. One of my daughters has always had sensitive skin, and some of the fragrances added to detergents can be irritating for her, so we order the unscented stain and odor pods for everyday washing. But my fiber-loving friends, we also order their sensitive skin laundry pods for washing our knit goods because it is enzyme-free, and they are formulated specifically for natural fibers like wool, cotton, cashmere, and silk. So it's perfect for hand washing your hand knits. Visit the show notes for this episode and use our link to visit the Drops website. They're currently running a sale on their bundles, which would allow you to try out various combinations of their products for one low price. Or go ahead and sign up for subscription delivery and give yourself the gift of having one less thing on your to-do list. Either way, your purchase will help support the show. Remember, I never accept sponsorship from a product I don't use in my own household. Again, visit the show notes for episode 5 at ithoughtiknewhow.familypodcasts.com and use the link to visit the Drops website so that your purchase will help support the show at no additional cost to you. I have been knitting a lot of projects since I last spoke to you, but I've only finished one of them. First, I've been knitting a lot on my second attempt at the Sensilla pattern by Shireen Nadir from Blue Brick. You may be tempted to ask me whether I bothered to swatch this time, and because I never learn, I'd answer no. I actually found a yarn I really liked on a trip to Margie's Yarn Crafts, and it's not the right gauge for this pattern. The pattern calls for a DK, and I fell in love with a hank of sport. It's Cascade Venezia, which is a blend of 70% wool and 30% silk, which is fast becoming my favorite blend for things I want to be nice and drapey. Anyway, the yarn was thinner than what the pattern called for, but the yardage of the hank was higher. The pattern calls for a DK that I can't get in my area that comes in hanks of 260 yards, and the Venezia has 307. So I decided to just go with it and not worry about gauge and just knit to the proper dimensions, which is not difficult with this pattern as it's a large triangle knit from the point up and then joined to work in the round to form the cowl area around the neck. I started working on it and I'm really loving how it's turning out, but because I do knit tightly and I'm using a thinner yarn, it is taking quite a while to get to the point that it's wide enough to join. The pattern calls for the large to be 24 inches around, and I'm actually aiming for at least 25 because I am taller and broader shouldered. I think I'm almost there, so I stopped working on it one evening with the intention of putting it on stitch holders the following morning to measure the width, and I haven't had a chance to pick it up again because I had some other things I needed to get done. Also, I had a panicky moment when I compared how much yarn I'd already used with how much knitting still needed to be done. So I hopped in the car and went back to Margie's and had another panic moment when I did not see the color on her shelves anymore, but the sample swatch was actually hiding it. So I lifted the swatch and there it was. An angel sang, and it was wonderful. And it was the same color, same colorway. It all worked out. So I do have a second hank in case I need it because I'm working it tighter than I should be with smaller yarn. I also made a trip to Webb's with my younger daughter who wants to knit her first sweater. She was stressing out about buying yarn online, and I thought, you know what, that's a good instinct. So let's encourage that and go put our hands on some real yarn. It's so hard to judge a yarn through a screen. So we went up to Webb's on a Saturday so she could touch and squish and pat a large variety of yarns and get a sense for what she wanted to work with. She ended up picking up a sweater's worth of Valley Superwash DK, which is the Webb's house yarn. And she decided on a pattern, a nice little cardigan. And we got home and I told her to swatch because I'm a hypocrite. And she did. And it was a good thing because she was knitting way more loosely than the pattern requires. So she's continuing to swatch at the moment and is actually saving and tagging the swatches she makes because she has also questioned the pattern choice she made. So she may end up knitting something different, but in the meantime, she's experimenting with different needles to try and figure out the appropriate gauge. While I was at Webb's, I picked up some bulky yarns to work with. I'd been sent some needles to test out, but they were size 10s and an N crochet hook. And I had used up all the bulky yarns in my stash before Christmas, making some last minute gifts. So I came out of Webb's with 2 skeins of Barocco Gusto, which I used to knit a juniper cowl, which is available for free on the Barocco website or through Ravelry. The Gusto is a thick, thin worsted spun blend of 45% wool, 45% acrylic, and 10% rayon. I got a silvery shade and found a pattern on Ravelry for a crochet cowl and planned to make that. But when I sat down to crochet with it, I didn't like how the yarn was looking crocheted. So I searched for a knitting pattern instead and cast on for the juniper cowl, which is a purl 3 knit 2 rib that every few rows adds a yarn over to one side or the other of the knit rib. It's just got a touch of movement to it as the rib goes up. I was knitting along on it happily when I got close to finishing this first ball, and I realized the cowl was going to be extremely long if I knit up the whole second ball as well. And I didn't want to have leftovers of this yarn sitting in my scrap bin for years if I decided to stop early. So after I joined the second ball, I began to add an additional purl stitch to each purl section of the ribbing on every other round that I knit. This widened the bottom of the cowl out into a circle that now spreads completely over my shoulders. It is so warm and it's going right into storage for fall because the days are just getting warmer now and I look forward to wearing it in October or so. I also picked up some Koigu bulky while I was there and used it to cast on for some Nigiri wrist warmers. These were designed by Yumiko Sakurai and is available as a free pattern on Ravelry. I'm really hitting the free patterns hard this month, I guess. The pattern is written for child and adult sizes. The colorway of the yarn is white and a bluish purple and that sort of yellowish browny green shade of the grass after the snow is gone and before it started to green up again in the spring. So even though it's bulky, the colorway is making me feel like it's an appropriate project for spring. These wrist warmers start out as a 2x2 rib that crosses at the wrist and continue up the hand. It's a very simple pattern, both in appearance and execution, and I'm hoping to have them done in time to take to London. Speaking of London, I was very innocently watching the Instagram story for Wool Bath one day, and she was talking about a fundraiser that involved knitting little hats, and I asked her about them, and she pointed me to thebignit.co.uk to learn more. The Big Knit is a fundraiser put on by Innocent Smoothies in the UK and a few other countries in Europe. They put out a call to knitters and crocheters to make small hats that will fit on their bottles. And for every hat donated, they give 25 pence or about 35 cents to Age UK. I have been holding on to yarn remnants from projects that are a yard or more long for years and years now. I use them as I need them to make accessories or little doll shirts or whatever. And I thought, well, I have quite an accumulation of these scraps and I'll be going to the UK and was already planning on popping into Wool while I'm in Bath. So I decided to knit up some hats for the project. They are very quick. I can knit one in about 25 minutes at this point, which is good because I committed myself to make 5 a day between now and when we leave on April 2nd. But it is taking about 2 hours a day to make the 5. And I have had to get creative. The snow is finally all gone, so I can get one knit if I take it with me on my daily walk. I had a meeting the other day that took almost 2 hours and required a lot more listening than writing or talking. So I sat in a corner and was able to knit 2.5 hats while I participated in that. I picked a very simple pattern from the Big Knit's website so I can do it mostly by feel. So I can knit them as I do the reading assignment for school, which has also been lovely prep for England, as my oldest is reading Pride and Prejudice right now. So I'm knitting all these hats as I prepare to donate them at Wool in Bath on the day I'll be visiting the Jane Austen Center there and walking around the streets pretending I'm a cast member in Persuasion. So I've been producing bunches and bunches of these hats, but that's also why I've only finished one project since my last episode. For those of you who listen to this on the first day or two of release, I have been saying on my social media accounts that if anyone wants to knit 10 hats and mail them to me so they arrive by April 1st, I will send you a set of stitch markers from my old inventory from when I had my stitch marker business before we moved to the Philippines. That offer still stands, but you will definitely have to knit fast and mail it priority at this point because April 1st is a week from the day this will release. This has been a last-minute project for me, so no worries. But I have enjoyed it myself, and it's been a very nice way to clean up my scrap yarn bin. Of course, if you are listening from the UK, you can check thebignit.co.uk for places to donate these hats, and you have until July to get them in, so check it out. At this point, I think I will have no partial skeins left by the time I'm ready to get on the plane, which is not something I have ever had happen before. My last project that I currently have on my needles is the Bonte Mitts designed by Joyce Remans. This is also a free pattern available through Ravelry. They are fingerless gloves with a cable traveling up the back of the hand. There is a thumb gusset in these, and they start and end with a twisted rib, but the overall stitch pattern is the same slip one purlwise with the yarn in back, knit one pattern of the Sensilla cowl I'm making. The pattern example is made up in a sport weight merino variegated yarn of white, purple, and blue. So with all that color variation and the ribbing and the cabling and the slip stitching, it's quite a chaos of color. I'm working it up myself in Selkie Sport by Dragonfly Fibers in their Denali colorway. The color variation in this yarn is much less pronounced. It ranges from a sea blue to a navy to small areas of black. I'll talk more about the yarn in a bit, but my hope with this colorway worked up in this pattern is that I'll still get the effect of a chaos of color, but that the patterning itself will be more noticeable because the color palette is a bit more restrained. I really love the yarn. Hold tight for a few minutes and I'll tell you more about it because I have a second hank that one of you may win for yourself. But right now, I have another song for you. If you listen to this podcast while you're getting stuff done, you are welcome in advance because this music is going to help move you along. If you listen to this while you're trying to be mellow, you may find you have to set mellow aside and get up and move a little. This is West in Africa by John Bartman and is available in the show notes or at Free Music Archive. A few more things before I go. First, part of that box I got from Knitter's Pride a few weeks back were some needles and a crochet hook from their ginger line. I was really pleased with them and ended up doing a very thorough review in the form of a blog post. So hop over to ithoughtiknewhow.familypodcasts.com to read through that if you want the details on the ginger line by Knitter's Pride. And finally, the time has come. I'm offering my first giveaway. Yay! I honestly did love the double point needles that Knitter's Pride sent me, but they were 6 inches long and I have very large hands. When I make anything hand related, I usually have to knit the quote man size. It was great when I played basketball and it is very helpful when I have to carry lots of things. But what it also means is when I tried to knit with 6-inch DPNs, the end of the working needle rubs against the pinky side of my palm and it gets really irritated. So I cannot continue to use these lovely 6-inch DPNs that I tested. I'm going to go ahead and start getting some of the 10-inch needles instead for my own use, but I do have a set of size 6 and size 10s that will now be part of the giveaway. And what is the point of giving away needles without some yarn to use with them? Nancy of Dragonfly Fibers very kindly sent me a couple of skeins of their Selkie Sport yarn in the Denali colorway. As I've said before, I've been using a hank myself to knit some arm warmers, and you can see the progress on those on my Instagram. But the other hank will go to the lucky winner. The yarn is a 70% blue-faced Leicester, 30% silk, and a very smooth, soft worsted spun yarn. So what does all that mean to a knitter? BFL has an excellent drape and has a bit of luster on its own, but add silk to it and these qualities are augmented. Worsted spun sometimes can be a confusing term because we also have worsted weight yarn. Worsted weight yarn is yarn that comes in at 19 to 20 wraps per inch, meaning if you wrap it gently around a ruler, it would wrap around 19 or 20 times in the space of an inch. Worsted spun yarn describes how well the fibers of the yarn were carded before they were spun. This is in contrast to a woolen spun yarn where there is minimal carding involved. So the strands of fiber fall in generally the same direction, sort of, but are still chaotic enough that the resulting yarn is very fluffy and soft. This is the sort of yarn we all love to touch and smush, but that often results in projects that pill like crazy. The Koigu Bulky and Barocco Gusto I mentioned earlier are both woolen spun. Worsted spun yarns have been prepared more thoroughly before spinning, so the fibers all lie in the same direction. They tend to wear better as a result and create smoother yarns. So Selkie Sport is a smooth, drapey yarn that will create well-defined stitches and wear well. Aside from how well they're working up as arm warmers, this would make a lovely little shawl or pair of socks. While I'm at it with this giveaway, I'll also have a poke around and see what else I can find between now and then to add to the box. So, how can you enter to win? I am not going to post this information on any social media pages because I want this first giveaway to be a thank you to a listener. So please spread the word, but don't give away the list of things you have to do to enter as you do so. Each of the following steps will get you one entry in the contest. So, first, join the Ravelry group. Second, post an introduction on the intro thread there. Third, follow me on Instagram. And fourth, tag up to 3 friends in the Instagram post for this episode. You can get up to 3 entries this way. If you do all of the above, you'll be entered 6 times. But I figured this would be a fair way for listeners to enter because you don't have to have an Instagram. You can enter doing the Ravelry entries. And you don't have to have a Ravelry. You could do the Instagram entries, or you could do both. It's up to you. This giveaway is open to anyone living anywhere that the U.S. Postal Service delivers to. I'm going to be headed to London with my youngest daughter a week after this episode is released, and we will be gone the entire time I should be planning and recording the next episode. So I'm just going to take a 4-week break between episodes this time instead of 2. You should expect the next episode to show up around April 23rd, and I'll announce the winner of the giveaway in that episode. The cutoff to enter will therefore be April 18th. I'll leave it open as long as I possibly can to give those of you who listen to the episode late a chance to get your entries in. When the time comes, I'll gather all the entries and ask Siri for a random number when I record the episode, so you'll get to hear the outcome in the show. Many thanks to Knitter's Pride and Dragonfly Fibers for providing the wonderful goodies for this giveaway. And thank you for listening and knitting with me for a bit. If you would like to contact me, you can email me at ann@familypodcasts.com. That's Ann with an E at familypodcasts.com. I'm on Ravelry, Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube as I Thought I Knew How. The Facebook and Ravelry groups are both called I Thought I Knew How Podcast. And I'm on Twitter as @ThoughtIKnewHow. I do have a website for the show at ithoughtiknewhow.familypodcasts.com. There you will find the show notes for each episode, including links to products I've mentioned and ways you can support the show. Every now and then I post a blog post there too. Remember, you can help support the show by ordering your laundry detergent from Drops by using the link in the show notes for episode 5. And thank you for your support. If you are a musician or know one and would like to have a song featured on the program, drop me an email and point me to where I can hear your music. You need to be the copyright holder to be able to grant permission, so please keep that in mind. Until next time, may you be blessed with stitches that never drop, yarn without joins, and plenty of time to knit.